ultimately we are giving the profile here in your book that really set the standard to understand how people really got wealthy versus just lots of income.
Exactly.
But you did it in a very non-judgmental way. And I guess that was the key here, is that you didn't come in and scorn these folks for being loose with their wallets, or else they wouldn't have talked to you.
Yeah. In fact, what we found was that most millionaires are first generation millionaires. And we found somewhere around 80%. And I remember a few years ago, I went through the Forbes 400 list and looked at the bios of each of the participants, or each of the people who were selected for the list. And it also paralleled many of the results of the Millionaire Next Door. Most were first generation billionaires. Okay.
Yep.
Most had their, stable households for the most part. Just entrepreneurial oriented people who built fortunes one step at a time. In fact, when you look at some modern day obituaries in the Wall Street Journal, like there's this one guy, Wayne Hughes, who died last year or the year before. B is B. Wayne Hughes. He died a billionaire, and he made his money on storage units and real estate. And what he did was, he says, look, in the 1950s, when he got out of college, he was driving around Southern California, and he saw all this junk people had in their yards and their driveways. He says, people need some place to store this stuff. Yeah. He says, I'm going to build storage units. And he said it was one storage unit at a time. You collect rents, and he had, tens of thousands of storage units by the time his career was over. But he says, look, the beauty of this as a real estate phenomena is that you don't have to worry about carpets. You don't have to worry about toilets. You don't have to worry about evictions. I mean, if they don't pay their fees, you change the lock on the storage unit, right?
Yeah.
And you have a lien on their merchandise or stuff, whatever they have in there. He says, but it's just one storage unit after a time. One of my friends, Joe Persico, he was a speechwriter for Governor Rockefeller in New York State. Again, everybody I know died. He died a few years ago. But when I was at his office, he had a little sign over his desk saying, writing is nothing more than putting one word after another. He also told me, Bill, never forget, you can't revise a blank page. He says, have the discipline of sitting down, butt to chair, write something for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, every day, and just keep doing it until you have something that is either a piece of junk or deserves some editing, and, you can go from there. But if you don't start, it'll never happen.
Let's go as a refresher. Let's go down the 7 common traits of the millionaire next door. Someone who is going to accumulate wealth over time, one block at a time, one storage unit at a time.
Yeah. Well, the cornerstone of that is frugality, and it's comes down to something called self-imposed economic scarcity. That's a nice fancy economic term. Self-imposed economic scarcity is what's between your ears, right? And you have to look at this and say, what is it I'm trying to accomplish? Am I trying to, in a willy-nilly or a endless pursuit of more money, or is there some upper limit that I should be looking forward to? And how much is enough? Now, this has such a broad, this is a whole hour discussion right here on this frugality. One of the major chapters in the Millionaire Next Door is buying used cars. Mm-hmm. Well, one physician illustrates this. He says, I like Mercedes, but I only buy one that is a couple of years depreciated. I'm going to let somebody give me the gift of early depreciation.
Really?
So it's fine. Buy a luxury car, but don't buy it as soon. Don't buy it right in the same year that it's manufactured. It's
it's more of a mindset than anything.
It really is. It's one thing after another. Really, it's not any one decision, but it's the mindset exactly. And so when you look at, for those who are just starting out in life, and you want to buy a house, why not buy a duplex? Why not have the person who literally lives next door to you pay your mortgage, right?
Yeah. So, but to your point, though, that is something where it's a little more esoteric because you're thinking about what is enough, right? What is enough? What am I happy with? Am I happy with a $400,000 home, or do I need an $800,000 home? What is enough? Even though, let's say, I can afford either, it's part of financial planning that maybe doesn't get talked about a whole lot. Is what is enough? What are you satisfied with? And that, to your point, it's really frugality. And do people have conversations around that? Is that a husband and a wife trying to get on the same page of, hey, what is enough for us as a family?
Yeah. The sane couples do that. Look, one of my friends in the construction industry, we were, sharing some social time together. They used the word drink, and I haven't had a drink all Lent here. But it's good. It's good discipline to clean the liver.
Yeah.
But he said, I wish I had my first wife back.
And this is a divorced wife, obviously.
Yeah. He divorced his first wife, who was just a very good woman. And, his second wife is just very attractive. And I do like her. There's no question. But she spends a lot of money.
Yeah. I wish I had my first wife back. It's not something you hear every day.
I know it. It's
awesome.
But we have an attorney who advertises in our market. Says, marriage is grand, divorce is 20 grand.
That's actually a genius marketing line for a divorce attorney.
I didn't watch all the Oscars, but I saw the first half hour, and the host said, okay, and now here's a producer who used to be worth $3 billion 2 wives ago. Another cheap shot. But you get the idea. It's about having some stability in your household. That's really critical here.
So what about the number 2 about really focusing on wealth building? And I think about this all the time. Is that in 1985 we were informed by a Nobel Prize winner, Franco Modigliani. He won his prize for the life cycle of money. And in the life cycle of money, it comes down to this. When you're young, you work for money, and when you're old, money works for you. Now, I have had more conversations with people, at my university, the professional staff, and we would talk about money, over lunch, and they said, well, I can't afford to start saving now. I got all these expenses. And I said, well, when are you going to start? Yeah.
And we talk about Franco Modigliani. When does that come up, right?
So Franco got he had there was a Nobel Prize around that. So the life cycle of money.
Yeah. But it makes so much sense. And it goes back to, the wisdom of Benjamin Franklin from 1758 when he wrote under the pseudonym Richard Saunders, as in Poor Richard's Almanac. One of his classic essays is titled The Way to Wealth. And you can Google that. It's free on the internet. It's about 3,500 words. But in that essay, he says, you got to be industrious. You got to persevere. You got to be a saver. You got to be an investor. Well, wait a minute. That's what the Millionaire Next Door talks about. That's what Franco Modigliani talks about. That's what Stanley and Danko talk about.
But again, the formula is there, but I think it's just the being able to do it and execute on it. That's obviously what is really difficult, right?
Because it is. Yeah. And again, Franklin had some marvelous insight into human behavior. You talk about a marketing consumer behavior course. Well, Franklin, in his concluding paragraph of that essay, said the townspeople heard the message about the frugality and industriousness and all that, heard the message, and then practiced the contrary.
Well, and it's funny to think about it. What has really changed since the 1700s? And the answer is, I don't know a whole lot, because if you, and I was going to ask you this later, a little bit later, but if you think about the evolution of, I'm always trying to find why it's so hard for people. But to your point, to accumulate wealth. And I always, one of my scapegoats that I blame it on in America is, let's call, I guess, Fifth Avenue or the marketing prowess of the United States. They're so good. Americans got so good at marketing, but then they keep getting better and better. And you think about, I think I've been calling it instaflation, which is Instagram is an example of knowing what you like, marketing to you so well, and making it seem as though you deserve this, you earned this. Why don't you just go ahead and buy it? And it's easier today than ever. But to your point, I'm looking for this modern day scapegoat. It really probably hasn't changed for 300 years, right? It's still, hey, money's coming in. I want this. I'm going to get it. That's just, is that accurate?
Yeah, it is accurate. Look, I was a professor of marketing for over 30 years.
It's your fault, Bill. It's all your fault.
It is, and I'm repenting now. I was telling students, all right, here's how you segment the market. Here's how you identify vulnerabilities. These are the buttons you push. This is how you can extract money from your target market and give them something of value, hopefully, namely your product or service. But we are going to make money. We're going to solve their problem. And you see, this can be so dangerous when you're selling junk, but when you're selling something that's valuable, like life insurance, right? I mean, why not? You're talking about, let's have some postponed gratification. Let's pay up now. And in the future, your heirs, or possibly even you, will be able to benefit from the cash value that has been created, or the death benefit. But that's a hard sell, because you're talking about an abstraction into the future. I get it.
So in marketing, we teach. You're saying you would teach vulnerability. What are the buttons to press?
Yeah.
But if we think about this, why though? So number two, millionaires next door, they allocate their time and their money and to wealth building activities. Where is this disconnect? Because that seems as though, are you, not everybody's going to be an entrepreneur. Are you saying you kind of have to be, or you can be a corporate executive and still make plenty of money and save plenty of money? But are you saying that the majority of people, because the majority of people are not millionaires, don't end up in wealth building activities? And why is that though?
Yeah, because they are so attracted to these ephemeral things like new cars that are going to depreciate. Well, who doesn't want a new car? I mean, it's wonderful. The smell is wonderful, right? But it's so fleeting. You're not going to find happiness this way. In fact, this is, gets to the issue, for my new book, of course, Richer Than a Millionaire, of what is the true prosperity we ought to be seeking. But let's finish a little bit on this, the Millionaire Next Door material.
But I guess, so you're saying there's two sides of this. One, it is the inability to be able to delay gratification. But what about the path of where you're working, really, whether you're in a job or you have a company? Is that, why does that get closed off for most Americans as far as really wealth building versus just earning a paycheck?
Well, they get into a rut. I remember talking to one of my students from the university. I saw her at an alumni event, and she goes, "Oh man, I have this great job in Manhattan, but I can't live in Manhattan. I live an hour away on Long Island, and so I got an hour. I got to get up at 4 a.m., catch a 5 o'clock train, be at the office at 6, get home around 8 o'clock at night, and do it again. What a grind." She said, "I can't do this. I don't care how much I'm making. It's killing me in terms of, the totality of my life." Right?
But we get stuck.
You do get stuck.
It's hard to get out on. It's hard to get out on your own. Right?
Yeah. And when, as I said, I was at the university for more than 30 years, and when I became an emeritus professor, the provost of the university called me in and said, "Bill, are you crazy? You're giving up a tenured job and you want to leave?" Yeah, I want to leave.
Yeah.
Because there are so many more things in life that I want to do, like be with my wife, be with my kids, be with my grandkids, be in the Adirondacks. I want to do things on my own terms. And in fact, that's exactly the reward of what money gives you, to be able to do what you want to do on your own terms. When you have the golden handcuffs that say, "Man, I can't leave or else the music stops," that's pathetic.
But so you were able to be a saver all those years, and then get to the point where you had independence, which is number 3. Financial independence more important than displaying high status. Mm-hmm. So you were able to get to this point. Would you attribute some, let's just say, of your own journey and wealth building, partially to obviously being a professor where you earn money, but also is a big part of it though the entrepreneurship that you did with writing, speaking, authorship, etc.?
Yeah, and it became part of even before the affluent research. I would be doing focus groups for various companies, like. You want to know about cheese and cheese byproducts?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. I love the topic towels? Of cheese.
Whether in the men's room you pull down 6 inches or 9 inches, that 3 inches is 50% more. So there's all sorts of things you can do with research and research design. And it was good. It paid the bills, and you just did what you had to do with a young family. And then at the university, you had opportunities to do world travel. I've been to Taiwan 9 times. It was great. You can, $200 suits that are custom made, and it's
not 2,000,
not 2,000, not 2,000. And my wife still bugs me on this. In my younger days, when I was doing a seminar in Switzerland, walking down the Bahnhofstrasse in Zurich, I said, "Man, I got to get this Rolex." She goes, "What are you doing?"
You can't buy a Rolex. That you say in your book you're not supposed to buy Rolexes.
Those are the days when I was a sinner. Okay.
Yeah.
I've repented.
And you've repented since then. The next part about millionaires, the profile of a millionaire is that they don't inherit their wealth.
Exactly. And then certainly in Tom Stanley's case, his father was a bartender, blue collar all the way, blue collar neighborhood. My father died at the age of 38, but he was, served in World War II and 70% disabled after that. And, when he died at 38 and I was 5 years old, my mom didn't have any resources for anything. And we had love, which is priceless, of course, but you learn how to live with frugality. In fact, I remember asking my mother, who was born in 1913, I said, "Look, Mom, you grew up during the Depression. How was it like?" She goes, "Well, we didn't know we were poor. We always had a cow. We always had chickens. We just lived off the land."
Yeah, it is kind of a fascinating thought of we didn't even know.
Yeah,
we didn't in 1913. We didn't even know. What about? I'm fascinated by this topic, and I've done a lot of research as well for my books What the Happiest Retirees Know. I'm a big, I think it's probably because I think the first book I ever read in, right, I think I was still a junior in college thinking about going into finance at some point, was your book, was the Millionaire Next Door. And so a lot of those concepts, I think, formed how I think just broadly about building wealth, our industry, our careers, which again are hugely relative to the kind of wealth we're able to create, at least the income side, and the asset side, right? With owning businesses. But it did stick with me, the concept of independent children. And one of the research points, and I'm always trying to tie money and happiness, or money habits and levels of happiness. And one of them, which was interesting, which I find fascinating from our research, was that the proximity to your children and your grandchildren is this direct relationship to your overall sense of well-being and your happiness. So more is better if we're closer to, and we're able to see our family, particularly our kids, the higher levels we have of happiness. However, so we want to live near our kids, but happiness levels do fall when our kids live with us. So we want our kids to live near us, but not with us. And I guess this goes back to the question of just really, it's about independence. We want independent children. What did you find around that?
Yeah. My two older kids have their PhDs. And my daughter is a professor in Maryland. And her name is Christy. I said, Christy, yeah, this is 20 years ago or so when she got her PhD. I said, look, man, you have 3 kids, you got all this stuff going on. Why the heck did you do this? Get your PhD at the University of Maryland. And she goes, well, Dad, I saw you do it. I can do it. So the parents are role models. In fact,
hey, if you can do it, if you can do it,
of course I can do this because I'm smarter than he is. Okay. But my point is, I was touched by that, because she was a little kid while I still was in graduate school. But she would see me sitting at my desk, laboring, trying to figure out something. And I guess that was kind of appealing to her, I guess.
And so it really, then what you're saying, those who are able to produce real wealth, part of it is that they end up having the activities that are generating wealth, building wealth and independence over time, and then that translates into almost automatically into independent children.
Yeah. Look, when you become an enabler and let them never leave the nest and have no expectation for them, I always expected my kids to succeed. I mean, that's a given. After high school, no, you're not going to do this gap year and go to Europe and you're not going to do that. No, you will go to college, any college you want to go to, but I will support that. But you will play by the rules. Now, that sounds draconian, I know, but it worked. Because I know 2 cases right now of successful parents who, in 2 different households, one kid is 1 3-credit-hour course short of getting his bachelor's degree, and he's 45 years old. His parents are ready to go into an assisted living, and the son is going to have to move out. Another one, a brother is a practicing psychiatrist, and his brother's wife is also a practicing psychiatrist. And this underachieving brother is 1 3-credit-hour course short of graduating. He just never wanted to say, okay, now I can go to the next level. Look, I don't know what their psychological profile is in terms of why they're not wanting to do this, but they seem otherwise like normal people to me.
Very capable.
Your point. But they have this fear saying, wait a minute, now I'm going to have to do something different if I get this degree.
So there's no excuse of, I've published this statistic several different times, but just if you look at a chart on the number of 18 to 35-year-olds or so, if I'm remembering this correctly, I may be a little bit off on the numbers, that used to be, 12% of that demographic lived at home, and then it went to 15, and then it went to 20, and now that it's something like 50% of that demographic still lives at home. And it may only be for a year or so, but we've seen a dramatic rise in adult children still living at home. And you can explain that away and say, well, the world's more expensive and it's more normal to live at home when you're 22 or 23. Your age, my age, we were out of the house the minute we could drive, and the minute we went to college, we're out and we didn't go back. And then society has softened that a lot. And we've seen the percentage of adults living back at home, not double, triple, quadruple. What about this? Number 6 on this kind of profile list of the Millionaire Next Door, Millionaire Next Door, great at seizing opportunity. Is that just a slightly higher level of risk taking?
Yeah.
Or not necessarily?
Well, you got to know opportunity when you see it. That's it. It doesn't come with a warning, does it? It's say, hey, it's like getting into the stock market, isn't it? Man, even Warren Buffett can't find anything to buy right now. It's right. You just have to be prudent, cautious, and say, yes, I feel good about this. But you can't get involved with reconfirming what you think to be true, even though it's not true. I love that Rumsfeld dictum, the known knowns, the unknowns, the unknown unknowns.
Yes, it's not the known knowns that are going to get us. It's the unknown knowns. What about occupation? You guys, I know that you have written a lot about occupations, and you talked about the farmer versus the city slicker. The one's more likely to accumulate a lot of wealth. What is the right occupation?
It's like
if you're really looking, so we've got a listener base this is the Retire Sooner podcast. People are listening. Our listeners are saying, how do I get in the position to be able to stop working if I want to, at least 1 year sooner, maybe 5 years sooner? What are they ultimately, if you're 30, what is the right occupation to get you there?
The one that you can have a passion for, maybe. Okay. When it becomes a drudgery, again, when I'd have to deal with meeting parents of incoming students to the School of Business, and again, as a professor of marketing, I would not typically, but on some occasions, I would get an overbearing mother telling her child, who is 17 years old, you will be an accountant because an accountant gets a good job. And the kid would say, I don't want to be an accountant. You will be an accountant. And this is why I think some people were blind. And it is. Accounting is a great occupation, no question. But you have to be into it, right? You have to say, yeah, I enjoy this. I enjoy studying the law and everything that goes with it. But if you're miserable in your job, that diminishes your life. That's for sure. It becomes a drudgery. So what is the best occupation? Look, owning a chain of car washes, that's good. In fact, there's a family in upstate New York that I think has 25 car washes. And if you read car wash news, you'll see them profiled on a regular basis as being successful entrepreneurs, $18 at a time, people buying a car wash. Right? Man, it's great. It's a great business. I know suffering attorneys saying, my gosh, why doesn't the phone ring? One of I remember a profile in the Wall Street Journal, a reunion of the class of 1985 of Harvard Law School graduates, saying it was miserable. They thought it was going to be the golden ticket having a Harvard law degree. But then you realize, wait a minute, you got to get out there and make it rain. You got to do these things. You got to do some uncomfortable things at times. And you got to be able to take no. You know, one of my friends is a salesman at Google. He works with government accounts. And he says, you know, even if I'm working with the government, I'm being told no 100 times before we get a yes, because we don't have all the decision makers on the same page. They have to be convinced and cultivated that this is, you know, the best way of using the budgetary dollars. Okay.
Even for Google.
Even for that's right. Yeah. And, you know, you just have to keep, look, as I said, we had 20 something rejections for Millionaire Next Door, that it's easy to give up, but we didn't give up.
The wealth spectrum formula, if I was redoing that, the percent times your age times your income equals your expected net worth, and you should be either above that or below that. So am I right to say this? So if you're 40 years old and you make $250 million, $250 million, if you make $250,000, it's 10% times 40 times 250, gets you to $1 million. Above that, if you're at 2 million, you're a prodigious accumulator. Below that, you're not.
Yeah. We had to come up with a rubric. First of all, that's based on a regression analysis where we have, the age and the net worth, and we found that dividing by 10 was a good estimate of the expected net worth. And you're right. If you have twice the expectation, you are going to be a prodigious accumulator. And if you're half that, you're an underaccumulator. And so consequently, it gives you a way of, it especially works if you're between 30 and 60 years of age. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if we're listening, for our listeners, the formula here is your age times 10% times your current income.
Yeah. That'll work.
Is that right?
Yep. Or I suppose age times income divided by 10, same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you're twice that, you're on a good path to wealth accumulation. You're a prodigious accumulator. Okay. Here's the problem. Most people are under accumulators, but that idea of having the above and the below on the spectrum allowed us to do these nice contrasting compares. Like, for example, that the chapter that has Dr. South and Dr. North. These were two specific individuals. The North is the one who's the prodigious accumulator, and South is the underaccumulator. And when you read that chapter, one of the things you'll see is, okay, Dr. North, buys the depreciated car and keeps it. Dr. South thinks he's doing such good research by every year or every other year studying the new cars that are available and turning in a perfectly fine car so he can get the latest and best. And why do they have disparate net worth? Because of that kind of mindset of what's important to them.
What about, so speaking of, what about social media? Do you feel, do you feel that that's impacted, or is it just going back to your point that we've been yanked and pulled to spend by very smart people in very smart ways since Benjamin Franklin was writing about this? Or is it harder today with social media and the perception of wealth?
I quit Facebook. The only reason I got on Facebook several years ago, I was doing an interview with Money Magazine, and they said the platform we're going to use for this interactive approach is Facebook. I said, I don't do it. And she told me, subscribe. All right.
You got to get an account.
I got the account. The interview was great. We're lifelong friends. She's now an editor at Barron's Magazine, Barron's newspaper. But my point is this. I found that my phone would ding about 100 times a day with some Facebook nonsense. I said, look, this is getting crazy. Yeah. I'm deleting the account, and I'm so much better off for it. Now, if I'm having a problem, I can imagine a teenager who has a Facebook account and these other social, whatever. I just don't need it. I don't want it. I want to talk to people like you, Wes.
It's probably more. This is more fun than a Facebook alert.
It is. Can you imagine that? Talking to you is more fun, but it's true.
What an upgrade! What an upgrade! It's a low bar.
It is true.
So I want to talk about your next or your latest book, which is Richer Than a Millionaire. What for Richer Than a Millionaire? What is your biggest takeaway and lesson from the new work that you're publishing?
The whole motivation behind it was, my colleague Tom Stanley died in 2015. For a 20-year period, I was the primary caregiver to my quadriplegic brother. My wife and I were, and the Millionaire Next Door certainly paid a lot of royalties and the speaking fees. I was able to buy him a house, keep him out of a nursing home, help him age in dignity. But here's a guy.
What happened? What happened to your brother, Bill?
Chronic progressive multiple sclerosis. It was,
that's
he died at the age of 68. And at 23, a little stumbling out of college, just unsure of his feet. And then 2 years later in a wheelchair.
It just slowly progressed over time.
Chronic progressive, but man, it was a downhill slide. But anyway, he had a good attitude, but he couldn't even touch his nose, if there's an itch. Okay, my point is this. Okay, here I am, university professor, making a lot of money, and I'm a healthcare aide, especially on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, because it's so hard to get aid service that's reliable. And we would talk about life, and we obviously knew he had a compromised system, and he knew he was dying. Well, we're all dying, of course, but it was more imminent for him, and he died a few years ago. But my point is this. Richer Than a Millionaire, the road to true, the pathway to true prosperity is really critical in the sense of, is it really about money? I'm looking at a note here. I'm doing a live presentation on Monday, and I have a slide called "How Much Does One Need to Feel Rich?" and it's curvilinear, and it's in the book. But it says, look, if you have $5 million, if you have $2,500,000, you think you need 5 times as much in order to feel rich.
You need 5. Okay, so this is a psychological and financial exercise. So if you have 2.5 million, you feel now at any age, Bill?
Yeah, well, this was based on typically the respondents to my surveys are adults. So it's okay, not.
So let's say you're 30, 40. Yeah. You think you need 10.
Yeah, they have these unrealistic expectations about what they think they need to be wealthy.
To feel wealthy.
Yeah,
to feel rich.
Because here's the thing. Yeah. About 10% of the households in the United States can be considered millionaire households if you include their home equity, their cars, their furniture, their savings. But only about 3% have investable assets of $1 million or more. And, to be a 1%er, at least before all this turmoil in the marketplace over the past 2 years, to be a 1%er in net worth in the United States, $11 million will do it. All right? The old joke, Bill Gates walks into a bar and everybody on average becomes a millionaire, right? Right? So,
right. Everybody on average.
Exactly.
Right. So to be in the top 1% of net worth, this is everything, not necessarily liquid, but it's 11 million. Yet the average American that has $1 million thinks they need 5, or the average American or to be wealthy. So nobody feels wealthy, pretty much.
The median net worth in the United States is $120,000 per household. $120,000. So if you have more than $120,000, you're better than half the population, and you're certainly not feeling it but you are well off. So here's the thing. Money's good. There's no question. But money and happiness are better. There's a psychological construct that my colleague Rich Van Ness and I did in the book, looked at subjective well-being, SWB, and it's a scale that's richer than a millionaire. And the higher you score, the more life satisfaction you enjoy. And what we find is people who become or are very charitable with their time, treasure, and talent tend to score very high on that. Now, Benjamin Franklin said to really be wealthy, you must be charitable. Well,
how much? How much do we need to be charitable?
Isaiah in the Old Testament says, give your coat to the naked, give drink to the thirsty. One of the pillars of Islam is almsgiving. In Matthew 25 in the New Testament, this was the same phrase that was used on Mother Teresa's solicitation letters for funds. That which you've done to the least of these, you've done unto me. Now, I can't imagine any religion making you miserable, but it turns out, well, sometimes it can be difficult, but
sure.
Every one of these, whether it be Franklin or organized religion, says you must be charitable to your fellow man. And that actually leads to happiness. Well, we can't talk about cause and effect or effect to cause, but there's a high correlation between those who are givers tend to be happier than those who are miserly.
Subjective
well-being.
Your subjective well-being skill. What's another example of that? And then people can take this in your book, correct?
Well, practicing the golden rule is a good way of being charitable. You don't have to give anybody money. You just don't have to be a jerk. Yeah,
that helps.
It really does.
That helps.
You look at road rage and pent-up anger and people who say, I don't have enough, but you do have enough. You're probably better off than the average person in your community if you just realize what you have.
Bill, one of the other guests, I get so lucky to have guests like you on the show. And I also had an author on this year named Ken Honda, who I think focuses almost exclusively on the subjective well-being scale when it comes to money too. And he taught me just the rule around appreciation of money, both coming in and out. And I tend to be probably like 90% of Americans where you get pissed if you get a traffic ticket and money's going out, right? It's like, I'm mad that something comes up and it's like, wait a minute, I want to take care of my dog. He just ate an entire box of goldfish, and he ate the box as well. So that cost me, $4,000 to the veterinarian. I'm like, I'm pissed about that. Like, I'm going to save you, Cody. But God, that's a lot of money. But it's a lot of money. Whereas Ken slapped me in the face on that and just said, no. It's not. You have it backwards, Wes. You got to be appreciative that you can spend the money. And that shift for me has actually been really helpful. The thought around money going out. It's like we get a paycheck and then we're paying taxes and I didn't earn as much as I might have thought. I'm disappointed with what's coming in. No. You got it backward, Wes.
Yeah.
Slap. It's so appreciative of all of the money that is coming in, and then the root of that money. So that is one of the most helpful things that I've learned in the last year doing this podcast.
Gratitude.
Yeah.
And again, when I think back at my grandparents and my parents and my brother, look, I have no problems, just opportunities. I really do.
Yeah, you have more than a cow.
I have more than a cow. That's right.
Where do you see people? What is the most popular method, or just I'd say the most effective method that you've seen in your research over so many years now? Is it to accumulate wealth? Is it stocks? Is it bonds? Is it treasury notes? Is it business? You tell me. Where do you see?
Very well.
Very well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that I can take that in a lot of ways. A, marry rich, or B, just stay married and don't get divorced because it's costly.
And
Both
have
ways,
a spouse
right?
that's on the same page as you in terms of it is good to build the future. In fact, oh gosh, before the Millionaire Next Door came out, it was in the early 90s. I remember a study by the Rand think tank that talked about that very thing. Being married it is one of the keys to wealth building. Because you tend to have, you tend to have, especially if you're on the same page and you're compatible, you have a future that you're trying to build together. And that building means sacrifice, build a foundation, enjoy the rewards in the future.
Well, hopefully my wife will stay with me.
Well, I hope so too.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about that you've heard about wealth in America is? In the time we live in.
Yeah, especially buying mailing lists based on things that people own. Say you're in a business and you say, I want to go after people who are, new car owners because they must have money. Or I want to go after people who have a college degree because they must have money. Well, there's all sorts of things, costs associated with these things that, they may have a leased car, or they may have a big loan on the car, or they may have a lot of student debt. That my point is that you can't have any one variable that describes who the affluent market is. It really does come down to these millionaires next door who live in regular neighborhoods. They live next door to me. I don't think the three houses next to me, they have anywhere near the fraction of wealth that I have, but we still cut our grass together. We're still out there. Hey, neighbor, you just don't call attention to it. And this is one of the things I like about being in the Adirondacks. Hey, there's Bill. How you doing? It's just a regular guy. You don't call attention to it. It's modest wealth.
Yeah.
It's when you have the flamboyancy, you probably don't have the wealth. You're just trying to prove something to somebody else. Now, look, there are some, what we found is for every luxury item, high-end item, for every one of those that are purchased, 4 out of 5 people can't afford it. 20% can actually afford it.
Define it. I'm sorry. What is a luxury item? What level are we talking here?
All right. So, say you have a $100,000 Mercedes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Or I even looked at. I used to have an E320. I looked at the e-cars recently. Man, they can go up to $120,000 now. Holy smoke! But anyway,
yeah.
For everybody who has a $100,000 Mercedes, probably 4 out of 5 can't afford it in the sense of, okay, it's just a car. There's 20% of the population that says, okay, I like it. I like the quality of German engineering, and I just do it, and it's good. What we find in general, whether it be the jewelry, the clothing, the cars, anything that's top end, about 20% of the purchasers are actually economically qualified to purchase those things. And the rest just want to look like they have the money.
And how do you quantify though if somebody's stretching? How do you look at it as if you can afford it or not? Is it more of a subjective in the bigger picture?
Well, you know what? It comes down to need. I mean, when you again, my own case in point, a modest background. Never thought I'd sell 4 million books. Never thought I'd have Washington Speakers Bureau represent me. I never thought all of these great things, black cars, I had to, when I took my recent trip to Texas, I had to book my own flight in the back of the bus. I said, my gosh, I'm not used to this.
Whoa, what's this?
Okay, but when somebody else buys it, it's great. It's great.